India after independence. Next. A new and divided nation. Next. When India became independent in August 1947, it faced a series of very great challenges as a result of petitions. 8 million refugees had come into the country from what was now Pakistan. These people had to be found homes and jobs. Then there was two problem of the princely states. Almost 500 of them, each ruled by a Maharaja or a Nawab, each of whom had to be persuaded to join the new nation. Next, the problems of the refugees and of the princely states had to be addressed immediately. In the longer term, the new nation had to adopt a political system that would best serve the hopes and aspirations of its population. Next, less than 6 months after independence, the nation was in mourning. On 30 January 1948, Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated by a fanatic Nehru Godse etc. because he disagreed with Gandhiji conversations and the Hindu and Muslim should live together in harmony. Next, that evening, a standard nation hearing in Jawaharlal Nehru's moving statement over All India Radio. Friends and comrades, the light has gone out of our mind, and there is darkness everywhere. Our beloved leader, the father of the nation, is no more. Next, India's population in 1947 was large, almost 345 million. It was also divided. There were divisions between high caste and low caste, between the majority Hindu community and Indians who practiced other faiths. Of the citizen of this vast land spoke many different languages, wrong many different kinds of dress, at different kinds of food and practiced professions. How could they made to live together one nation state? Next, to the problem of unity was added the problem of development. At independence, the vast majority of Indian lived in the villages, farmer and peasants independent on the monsoon for their survival. So did the sea no farm sector of the rural economy. For if the crops failed, barbers, carpenters, weavers, and other service groups would not get paid for their service either. Next, in the city, factory workers lived in crowded slums with little access to education or health care. Next, clearly the new nation had to lift its message out of poverty by increasing the productivity of agriculture and by promoting new job creating industries. Next, unity and development had to go hand in hand. If divisions between different sections of India were not held, the could result in violent and costly conflicts. High caste fighting with low caste Hindus and Muslims, and so on. At the same time, if the fruits of economic development did not reach the broad masses of the population, it could create fresh divisions. For examples, between the rich and poor, between cities and the countryside, between regions of India that were prosperous and regions that lagged behind. Next, a constitution is written. Next, between December 1946 and November 1949, some there 100 Indian had a series of meetings on the country's political future. Next, the meetings of these constitute assembly were held in New Delhi, but the participants come from all over India and from different political parties. Their discussions resulted in the framing of the Indian constitutions which came into effect of 26 January 1950. Next, one feature of the constitution was its adoption of universal adult franchise. All Indians above the age of 21 would be allowed to vote in state and national elections. This was a revolutionary step, for never before had Indians been allowed to choose their own leaders. In other countries, such as the United Kingdom and the United States, these rights had been granted in stages. First, only men of property had the vote. Next, then men who were educated were also added on. Working class men got the vote only after a long struggle. Next, finally, after a bitter struggle of their own, American and British women were granted the vote. On the other hand, soon after independence, next, India chose to grant this right to all its citizens, regardless of gender, class, or education. Next, a second feature of the constitutions was that it guaranteed equality before the law to all citizens, regardless of their caste or religious affiliations. There were some Indians who wished that the political system of the new nation be based on Hindu idols and that India itself be run as a Hindu state. Next, they pointed to the example of Pakistan, a country created protect and further the interests of particular religious communities, the Muslim. However, the Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru was of the opinion that India could not and must not become a Hindu Pakistan. Next, beside Muslim, India also had large populations of Sikhs and Christians as well as many Parsis and Jains. Under the new constitutions, they would have the same rights as Hindu, the same opportunities when it came to seeking jobs in government or the private sector, the same rights before the law. Next, the third feature of the constitution was that it offered special privilege for the poorest and most dividend Indians. Next, the practice of the described as a site, a bolt on the fair name of India was absent. Hindu temple previously open to only the higher caste were thrown open to all, including the former untouchables. After a long debate, the Constitution Assembly also recommended that a certain percentage of seats in legislatures as well as job in government be reserved for members of the lowest caste. Next, it had been argued by some that untouchable, or as they were known now, Horizon candidates did not have good enough grades to get into the prestigious Indian Administrative Service, but as one member of the Constituent Assembly, H.J. Khandkar, argued, it was the upper caste who were responsible for the Horizon being unfit today. Addressing his more privileged collegians, Khandekar said, next, we are surprised for thousands of years. You engaged us in your service to serve your own ends and supersede as us to such an extent there neither our mind nor our bodies and nor even our hearts work, nor are we able to march forward. Next, along with the former untouchable, the advice of scheduled tribes were along granted reservations in seats and job, like and scheduled caste. These Indians too had been deprived and discriminated against. Next, the tribal and been deprived of modern health care and education while their lands and forests had been taken away by more powerful outsiders. Next, the new privileges granted them by the Constitution were meant to make amends for this. Next, the Constitution Assembly spent many days discussing the powers of the central government versus those of the state government. Some members thought the center's interests should be foremost. Only a strong center, it was argued, would be in a position to think and plan for the well-being of the country as a whole. Other members felt that the provisions should have greater autonomy of the freedom. A member from Mysore feared that under the present system, democracy is centered in Delhi and it is not allowed to work in the same sense and spirit in the rest of the country. A member from Madras insisted that the initial responsibility for the well-being of the people of the province should rest with the province governments.